I'm saying China has to defend Iran. Okay? Chinese presence is a deterrence enough as it is a massive trade partner of a bunch of the other Gulf region countries as far as oil goes, and also with Israel as well. That's it. It needs to, I'm a peace hawk, not a war hawk.
World powers also working out their positions on the conflict. We're going to cross now live to Beijing, talk to our correspondent Yenna Lee, who joins us from there. Yenna, what's China's official position, first of all, then? I mean, have we heard anything from President Xi Jinping?
Well, we have now, Stuart, in his first official remarks since the start of this conflict, President Xi...
Guys, any day now, big condemnation. This one is going to be the biggest, okay? Like... What a giant condemnation this one is. This one's going to hurt. This condemnation, oof, wow. Yeah. Weapons grade enriched condemnation. Oh, this is going to be a sternly worded letter. Okay. You feel me? The sternest.
Xi Jinping reportedly told state news agency Xinhua that China opposes acts that infringes on the territorial integrity of other countries, and added that all parties should promote de-escalation, whilst also putting forward his willingness to play a constructive role in this. A spokesperson, meanwhile, here at the Foreign Ministry in Beijing also made a thinly veiled critique to the United States, saying, I quote, "The country with special influence on Israel in particular needs to maintain..."
Sorry, China isn't bloodthirsty demons like the U.S. is. Brother, what are you talking about? China needs to defend Iran. That's it. They need to defend Iran for their own interests. They need to defend Iran for their own sovereignty. Why is America attacking Iran? They're attacking Iran not for just like, not because like they were like, oh, we just don't like Khamenei. They're attacking Iran because ultimately, they want to destabilize Iran, which is a major regional player, so they can have the entire energy production capacity of the world under their control, with some exceptions. But pretty much the entirety of the energy production will be free of Iranian intervention. I'm not even making an argument that like China needs to enter the conflict for moral reasons. Like, oh yeah, like my expectation is not that the Chinese state is going to do anything moral. Okay. They're not. They are only interested in China, and that's it. China is nowhere near, not even a fraction as ideologically invested as like the USSR was in terms of offering support to allies. Okay. They're not. Iranian oil is like 2% of China's energy. No, you're missing the forest for the fucking trees. And it's not 2%. It's about 10%. It's a lot more important to Iran than it is to China, but 10% is nothing to it's nothing to discount. But also you're failing to comprehend what I'm talking about when I say this is a matter of significant national security concern and sovereignty concern for China. Okay? Because if there is no Iranian threat in the region, and let's say America turns around and says, we got to shut off the oil faucet to China, there is no retaliatory measure. There's no immediate retaliatory measure that China can implement by way of its allies like Iran. That's the whole reason why America wants to pack up Iran to begin with, so they can have not one, but two different methods of trying to cripple Chinese manufacturing and to cripple China in general. I've spent the last week explaining this over and over again. Law that all the chatters expecting China to do anything other than protect its own government interests. Remind that both U.S. and China sold weapons to Sri Lanka to help them with their out of the Tamils, which are war crimes almost identical in characters of those Israel's doing against the Palestinians. Morals never stop China from taking the same side as the U.S. on the Tamil. This is pure geopolitics. I know, which is why I'm saying from a pure geopolitics perspective, I think China needs to react beyond just simply stern warnings. But what do I know? You know, I'm a nobody. I'm just a dumb guy. Xi Jinping, I'm sure, is making a calculated decision here. You see what I'm saying?
a fair and objective position. State media such as the tabloid The Global Times also blaming the US for abandoning the nuclear deal and letting this situation escalate. China's official stance is that Israel's actions constitute a violation of Iran's territorial integrity. And although the Chinese foreign minister did tell his Israeli counterpart that Israel shouldn't have to constantly live in anxiety about a potential war either, this is, by the way, a much stronger tone and position that China has taken compared to when Russia invaded Ukraine. In any case, though, this conflict is creating the kind of instability Chinese leaders want to avoid at all costs.
So you want China to join the war? That's insane. I want China to defend its own interests in the region. Why is America defending Israel? Why is America letting Israel do whatever the fuck it wants in the region? It's for its own from the adversary that America is very clearly gearing to fight. China has made a lot of Hasan being a war hawk. What are you talking about? Iran is the one that's been attacked. What do you mean I'm a war hawk? Are you stupid? What the are you saying? I'm saying China has to defend Iran. Okay? Chinese presence is a deterrence enough as it is a massive trade partner of a bunch of the other Gulf region countries as far as oil goes, and also with Israel as well. That's it. It needs to, I'm a peace hawk, not a war hawk. Its presence is a deterrence. What the is just like Iranian retaliatory strikes are the only way that Israel ever stands down, judging by 77 years of Israeli history of conquest and blood and soil politics. The only time Israel ever stands down is when the death toll for the Israeli occupying force is too high. Stand down when there is a militant deterrence in the form of retaliations. I don't want anybody to lob missiles at anybody. What the fuck is wrong with you? But Israel doesn't stop. I'm not in the business of vengeance. I'm in the business of justice. The reason why Israel has never stopped its expansionist ambitions and its nationist ambitions is because they feel like as long as they're backed by America, as long as they're defended by America, they can do it without experiencing severe repercussions. That's it.
So Beijing might want to position itself once again as a helpful force for peace in the region. You might remember that it did play a role in brokering the Saudi-Iran deal back in 2023. But that one was pretty much laid out before China just...
Like, America and Israel sent in a conditional surrender from Switzerland, who is the mediator between Iran. There is a 1-week deadline for Iran to sign, and this is the only thing that will prevent military strikes. What? When did this come out? Are you brain dead? What is this? Isn't wanting China to defend Iran kind of war hawkish though? Or is it a way to further peace? What is that? How is that a war? Brother, what is going on here? It's like saying, hey, if you tell Israel to stand down by engaging in discourse here in America and in acts of civil disobedience here in America, you're a war hawk. The best option is the most peaceful one, okay? But you have to go down these different routes and exhaust all of the avenues. The best possible way to stop Israel is by getting America to tell Israel to stand down. And the only way to do that is with tremendous public pressure, okay? Tremendous public pressure that causes a lot of private enterprise from also enacting economic pressure on the state of Israel. But if that doesn't happen, then the next step is, let's say in a world where America says you have to stand down and Israel doesn't comply, which would never happen, obviously. But in that circumstance, then America shuts off all aid and all support and implements sanctions on Israel. Let's say Israel says, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stand down after all sanctions. The nuclear sanctions package is implemented on Israel like it was with Russia, which, by the way, Russia obviously has a much larger economy that is geared towards avoiding these sorts of sanctions. And that's precisely the reason why they were able to backtracking an incoming ban. Oh, you're talking about the chatter? Okay, no, it's fine. There can be some reasonable discourse here. Calm down. Okay? If that doesn't work, if the sanctions package doesn't work, then I have to engage in military intervention. Does that mean I'm a war hawk? I don't want that. Obviously, none of these things would happen because it takes one phone call for Israel to stand down from America, obviously, due to all of the other options that America has. Israel would cease to exist if it wasn't for America. Israel would never be able to be this violent of a country if it wasn't for a constant flow of American weapons and American defense contracts and American munitions that they can use in their offensive campaigns and the anti-air defense systems that America is constantly supplying munitions for. Okay? The same principle applies for Iran. Iran is currently engaging in very restrained acts of retaliation as opposed to Israel's incredibly unrestrained acts of escalation. Okay? It's tit for tat. But that is not seemingly enough for Israel to stop. Obviously, the first option and the best option here is a reasonable compromise through the negotiations process. America's positions, however, are maximalist, and they seem disinterested in even budging a little bit. Like ridiculous provisions like, oh, you can have a nuclear energy grid as long as you're getting nuclear power outside of Iran. Like, that's ridiculous. It's a non-starter, okay? They don't even want Iran to have any nuclear power whatsoever. That is a ridiculous position. Not that it matters, because very clearly America used the nuclear bargaining, the negotiations, as a cloak and daggers operation to allow Israel to first strike Iran. But if the retaliatory attacks don't actually cause Israel to incur significant enough penalties that they stand down, then there has to be something else that is a protective banner over Iran. And that is the presence of China. If that doesn't work, if America and Israel are so gung-ho that they still want to destabilize the country, they still want to do a decapitation strike and continue bombing Iran, then yes, China has to enter the fray in an effort to defend its asset in the region. I think I'm pro-Iran, I think I am not pro-Iran, but more like against the Israeli aggression. Also, you're 100% Israel would die in a second without the U.S. Israel would not die at all if Israel was not such a violent nation. That's the other side of the story. If Israel was just like a normal, if it wasn't a settler colonial enterprise at its inception, and if it wasn't like constantly doing unjustifiable acts of violence against everyone in the region, then it would not be in this position at all. But of course, then it would not be the most reliable ally for American ambition in the region as a destabilizing force when necessary.
Nudged it over the edge, and no one really sees Beijing as a neutral force in this conflict due to its proximity to Tehran. This situation is clearly very different and very volatile.
Yeah, no, you said their instability of great concern to the Chinese. Elaborate on that for us. Why particularly?
Both for economic and geopolitical reasons. China is dependent on Middle East.
During the Bangladesh Liberation War, the U.S. parked USS Enterprise in the Bay of Bengal as a tacit nuclear threat to India and Bangladesh and support Pakistan. The USSR sent ships and subs to tail the Enterprise. One cannot imagine China parking their aircraft carriers next to America's. That's all they need to do. Yeah.
Eastern oil. 43% of its oil imports come from the region, and some of that from Iran. Chinese buyers have been profiting off of cheap Iranian low prices thanks to the Islamic Republic's isolation. Then we have the whole strategic part to this. The Iranian regime has been rather useful to Beijing. Together they've been flaunting their anti-Western stance, and notably China has been a prominent voice against Western-led sanctions on countries like Iran and Russia. A power vacuum in Iran or drastic regime change would certainly be a problem for Beijing. With Donald Trump in the White House, there's this added level of uncertainty. And it's not because the US sides with Israel that China would automatically show unwavering support for Iran either. Its stance is much more nuanced than that, in part due to Beijing's efforts not to alienate Gulf states or its relationship with Saudi Arabia. For now, China is, rather sitting back and observing the situation. It might want to implicate itself a little bit more as it progresses. But its main priority today is protecting its own citizens. Some 1,600 have already been taken out of Iran, according to authorities, with evacuations out of Israel towards Egypt set to start on Friday.
Yeah, thanks so much, Yana Lee, our correspondent, talking to us live there from Beijing.
Well, we can speak now to Dr. Victor Gao, who is...
For China, there's also another option here, which is, again, the amount of pressure that it could actually put on Israel with sanctions themselves, not sanctions necessarily, but refusing to trade with Israel. Going so far as to deny the rare earth minerals that are necessary for a lot of defense production in the country to America is a long-winded way of actually harming Israel's interests as well. They only did that, though, when America struck at them for trade. They're so horny for trade is unacceptable. We will punish you.
Is the Vice President of the Center for China and Globalization, who joins us from Beijing. Dr. Gao, always a pleasure talking to you. We've never talked about the state of relations between China and Iran before, so why don't we make that the starting point? How would you describe the state of ties between Beijing and Tehran?
Thank you very much for having me. China highly respects Iran as a sovereign nation with territorial integrity, and the two countries engage with each other on equal terms. And China does not recognize the extraterritoriality of any other country's one-sided and self-imposed sanctions against another country or against China. Therefore,
China recognizes sanctions as a way to stop trade from happening, and that is unacceptable. Maybe that's why they hate the United States. It's because they keep doing sanctions, which is really up. They're like, how could any country deny trade to another? We're trade maxing.
Therefore, when China deals with Iran, we deal with Iran in all spheres of relations, including energy cooperation. And I don't think this is a problem. And if a third country cries foul, the problem is really with itself, with its attempted extraterritoriality of its unilaterally imposed sanctions. And I think once this Israel-initiated war against Iran started, the Chinese government's position is very clear. Israel is in violation of a self-imposed war against a member of the United Nations, against its sovereignty and territorial integrity, and China really deplores Israel's military attack on nuclear facilities inside Iran and considered it as a very serious offense against.
The facility that Israel blew up yesterday is a literal Chinese-Iranian joint collaborative project. That is yet another example of what I'm talking about with respect to China not protecting its own interests. Their ambition for permanent trade and trade maxing will inevitably come back to haunt them. Maybe they could consider, I don't know, beefing up Iranian anti-air defense capabilities as an opportunity for trade. You get energy. China, think about it from the perspective of trade. You get energy, more energy. Ooh. But then you do trade and you give anti-aircraft capabilities to Iran, which is, again, more trade. Think about how much trade opportunities you could create in this situation.
Against world peace and security.
Okay, I mean, just to give you the Israeli line on what you just said, what we're told by Israeli officials repeatedly on this channel is that Iran is very close to being able to build a nuclear weapon. It might already be able to do so. And they're constantly calling for the destruction of Israel. So they say what they're doing is preemptive self-defense. What do you make of that argument?
It is of high hypocrisy for a country like Israel, which violated international convention in possessing nuclear weapon to start with. And now it's accusing another country, Iran, for attempting to acquire nuclear weapons. I don't think there are any higher level of double standard and hypocrisy for Israel to accuse another country of trying to possess nuclear weapons. I think the Middle East will be much better off if Israel disarms itself with nuclear weapons and no other country will want to possess nuclear weapons. That will probably create a better level playground for all the countries involved in the Middle East. For Israel to possess nuclear weapons and to constantly threaten other countries with nuclear attack is really a very serious problem. And I think international community really need to join together to put an end to such blatant violation of peace and security, not only in the Middle East, but in the world at large.
We've heard from the president of China, President Xi Jinping.
I'm sorry, but this is Erdogan. Basically, I can't tell if this is Victor Gao or Recep Tayyip Erdogan I'm listening to. Tough talk. Everybody hears those words. It goes based. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the trade must flow to a country that you just openly stated is a fucking nuclear power that is a real and present danger to every other country in the region.
Jinping saying on Tuesday that China is, quote, deeply worried about Israel's military operation against Iran. Where do you think you and the president of China see things heading to? Why the worry? How dangerous could the situation be?
Well, as a general point, China is always worried if a war breaks out. And this time, this war is a complete surprise attack launched by Israel against a sovereign and independent country like Iran. And the fact that this surprise attack took place when the United States and Iran are still engaged in discussions about how to end this nuclear problem is particularly surprising. It's, in my best judgment, it's like the Japanese surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in the Second World War. And I think Israel has also committed all the crimes in massively killing the government officials, military officials of Iran. And no country should tolerate any other country like Israel to commit such massive amount of assassinations before a formal declaration of war against Iran, for example. So I think the Chinese president is legitimately worried about the scale of the attack, the potential loss of life, as well as the potential escalation of the situation, because you never know how this situation may evolve eventually, whether it will get out of control, whether it will escalate from conventional war to nuclear war, for example, or whether, ironically, it will force Iran to really develop a nuclear weapon. And what will be the consequence for Israel and Iran to both have nuclear weapons? Do they really want to use nuclear weapons against each other? What will be the consequence for peace and security in the Middle East and in the world at large? Therefore, it is time to call on Prime Minister Netanyahu, stop all the craziness. He probably wants to save his political skin rather than really serving the fundamental interest of the people in Israel to launch such unilateral, self-imposed surprise attack on a big country, a great country like Iran.
Dr. Gao, on Tuesday, China accused the US President Trump of pouring oil on the conflict there between Iran and Israel. Why and how does Beijing see the United States making things worse with regards to this situation?
Well, I think evidence points out to a joint operation by the United States and Israel against the country of Iran. They probably have a division of work. The United States was not very much involved on the surface of the situation, but no one should be surprised if the United States highly coordinates its information gathering, etc., with Israel. And the fact that Israel has kept saying that the United States is involved from the very beginning of the war, etc., illustrates the level of cooperation and collaboration between the United States and Israel against Iran. And the United States still keeps saying that they are not involved, but then they need to come up with a proof that they are not involved. And not being involved is not sufficient. And the United States really need to pull all their levers to force Israel to stop this war against Iran, and also to stop Israel from misusing the United States, creating all the misinformation about that the United States and Israel are working together to, for example, destroy Iran or to create a regime change in Iran, etc. So I think it is time for the United States. My personal concern is that if the United States really gets bogged down in this war against Iran, no one knows what will happen to the United States in the coming years or coming decades.
Well, that could be beneficial for China, couldn't it? Because if the United States spends large sums of money, a considerable amount of time and attention on affairs in the Middle East, that leads what it wants to do in a more, let's say, unrestrained way.
Allow me to emphasize one point. China always benefits by protecting peace and stability anywhere in the world. And China will feel very much at a loss if peace and stability and prosperity anywhere in the world will be damaged by especially unilaterally imposed war of one country against the other country. Therefore, such benefit, if any, that China will enjoy is not.
He ain't wrong. If there isn't peace, then they can't do trade. It would be devastating for trade maxers. They need the trade max.
Not for China's own benefit. It is for peace and stability and the well-being of mankind. It is time to stop Israel in this war against Iran and to prevent the United States from really joining this war together with Israel, which may escalate the situation and create unprepared consequences for mankind as a whole.
You mentioned regime change in your earlier response, and I want to pick up on that because we heard from President Trump on social media saying, quote, "We know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding. He's an easy target, but he is safe there. We're not going to take him out, at least not for now." How would China react if the United States did, or if Israel did, kill the supreme leader?
This is exactly the confusion that President Trump is creating deliberately or unintentionally. I don't think assassination of a head of state or head of government or political leaders or military leaders of another country is the right thing to do in the world of today. I think countries need to have the minimum decency and the protocol in dealing with another country. Assassination is the bad thing, and assassination may serve as a boomerang, eventually may come back to hurt yourself and haunt you. Therefore, engaging in assassination, especially against head of state or leader of another religious faith, for example, or against the major political and military leaders of another sovereign country, is the wrong thing to do, especially at a time when Israel has self-imposed this undeclared war in a surprise attack against Iran. This is the worst time for the head of the state of the United States to imply that assassination may be involved in killing the leader of Iran.
You mentioned in your first answer, you painted a picture of a very cordial set of relations, cordial ties between Beijing and Tehran. Let me put this scenario to you. If Iran goes the same way as, for example, Syria, and the assassination that you mentioned or otherwise brings about a change of management, shall we say, in Iran, I mean, that would be a loss for China, wouldn't it? Because you'd have lost an ally, a key ally in this region. Because if a pro-Western government replaces the government that's there already, that would be a loss for China, wouldn't it?
No, I don't think so. I think China has always the long perspective and historical perspective to look at any contemporary events like
I don't get Gao being the pro-China spokesperson. Bro is a lib in the opposition party. Give us a true CPC loyalist, wolf warrior, diplomat. I mean, if you know the intricacies of Chinese politics, then you already know that every Chinese person, even if they're from fucking Taiwan, when it comes down to talking about Chinese foreign policy or China as a nation, becomes the most pro-China person you've ever fucking seen or heard, regardless. When it comes to talking about like Chinese prosperity, even Chinese people in Taiwan will still recognize how prosperous of a nation China has become. He's certainly not liberal. And what do you mean by opposition? He is in the government coalition. That's not what I said. That's what the chatter said. No, that's blatantly wrong. There are actual libs there. Gao is very much pro-CCP. Have met him in person. He's an extension of the state. His role in his think tank is like a diplomat. Philly D. Thumbo.
What had happened in Syria and what is happening in Iran.
What did he put me on for?
We are not confused by the events on a day-to-day basis. We look at the situation in 10 years, in 100 years, sometimes 500 years, if not even longer. Therefore, in the historical perspective, if you really look at the situation in the long-haul perspective, war is bad. For Israel to impose an undeclared war on Iran is an aggression. And whatever Iran is doing is justified because they are defending their own sovereignty and territorial integrity. They are fighting back against aggressors. And if the United States wants to join Israel to become an aggressor against Iran, well, history will eventually have its own verdict. Therefore, I think all of us need to work on with Israel to stop the war as quickly as possible and come up with peaceful ways to negotiate with Iran. And I personally will completely support the ending of whatever nuclear weapon program, if any, by Iran. And I do hope Israel will also dispossess nuclear weapons and Middle East will become a nuclear-free zone. That will be in the best interest of all the countries in that particular part of the world.
It's so funny for him to just like hit these notes though over and over again. It's America slowly but surely erodes all of China's allies.
China will do its best to promote the real justified result for any such tension or conflict of war. And China will do its best to prevent the war from escalating or from spreading out, impacting on more countries and hurting more people in that part of the world.
Bro, why are you such a war hawk? The future is Chinese. Taiwan is China for sure. They're unwavering in their stance. Their liberals are light years left of what we consider lib-centrist.
The United States and some of its allies view China as being part of what it now calls...
That F must have been literally a stutter because it didn't even show up on my end. So I assume people were ready to let it rip, to be like, it's over, the stream is done.
CRINC, which is this new acronym, which is being bandied around quite a bit by foreign policy talking heads on television channels all over the world. CRINC meaning China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. I don't know what you think of that acronym, if you've heard it used much before, but let me just ask you this. Were the United States to intervene and join forces with Israel in a very overt way and join, do you see a day that China or Russia or other actors could perhaps join in support of Iran?
Well, imposing a war on a great country like Iran with 1.66 million square kilometers and with up to more than 90 million people, and a country which has tremendous amount of spiritual leadership among the Shia people throughout the world, is really poking for more disaster if it is not stopped right away. And if other countries want to join the fight on the side of Israel, I will urge them to stop that right away. And if, for example...
Oh, yeah, totally. Oh, thank you for the urging. It seems like they're definitely stopping. England, Germany, France.
Or other countries want to join the fight against Iran, you never want to exclude the possibility that other major countries want to fight together with Iran, because the war imposed on Iran is the unjustified war. It's a war of aggression. It's undeclared war. It's a surprise attack. And any people, any country under such surprise attack, an attack of aggression, has full legal justification to fight back. Therefore, stopping the war right now is the best way. Allowing it to escalate and to get out of control will most likely hurt the fundamental interests of the people in Israel, as well as in Iran and in many other countries in that particular part of the world. And I think China is doing the right thing, urging on Israel to stop the war, urging on Iran not to escalate, for example, try to wrap up the situation so that all parties involved can talk about peace rather than war and war and war. China does not like war of any kind, and China does not want to see any country launching a war of aggression against another country.
And just lastly, that acronym, CRINC.
The Piker Broadcasting Service is sponsored by you, the viewers, and it is entirely for you, the viewers. That's right. You can subscribe to the broadcast, and this keeps the broadcast completely ad-free, with the exception of the notable backers of the Piker Broadcasting Service, which is the glorious nation of the People's Republic of China. The Piker Broadcasting Service is sponsored by the 100 Years of Chinese Prosperity. Piker Broadcasting Service is also sponsored by the glorious nation of Qatar. But once again, your $6 a month subscriptions or your free subscriptions in the form of a Twitch Prime allow me to maintain my editorial independence. Viewers like you.
Viewed as being a group of hostile or adversarial nations by Washington and some of its allies. What do you make of it? What do you make of the acronym?
Well, whatever acronyms you come up with, it cannot change the fact that China today is the major force defending peace and stability and development in the world. And the fact that China is the largest trading nation with more than 140 countries in the world speaks eloquently about what China really cares about. That is, promoting peace, defending free trade, for example. If anyone wants to confuse China with a force against the peace, then he or she is either...
Like, remember, the most aggressive action that China took was literally to deny key materials that they have a monopoly over that are incredibly important for defense manufacturing purposes. And the only reason why they did that is because of the tariffs. America was like, no more tariff, no more trade for you. Fuck you, China. And they were like, okay, well, that's our trade nuclear option. Yeah. Israel, if Israel accidentally disrupted like a Chinese carrier or something, or Chinese supply lines, then they would have hell to pay. Okay. China doesn't give a fuck. Israel could do ethnic cleansing nonstop. They don't give a shit. But the moment that they actually harm Chinese trade, somehow all hell breaks loose.
For example, vocal commentators in the space like Hasan think actually happened that night. But then next up from that in the news, Iran just bombed a key Israeli hospital, with now Israel vowing vengeance, and all of that as Trump has reportedly approved attack plans on Iran, because Israel's air defense system has been intercepting most of the missiles that Iran's been hurling its way, but of course it's not 100% effective. And so today you saw 3 buildings being hit, including the largest hospital in southern Israel, though according to Iran, that hospital they claimed that they were going after military and intelligence headquarters near the hospital, but either way, Israel's health ministry service said that 71 people were left with minor injuries, with it likely only being minor injuries because the missile hit an old surgical inpatient building which had been evacuated in recent days. But still, you had Israeli President Isaac Herzog tweeting this morning, calling the attack a war crime and declaring that Iran's supreme leader can no longer be allowed to exist. And that, as you had Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying, "We will make the tyrants from Tehran pay the full price," with him adding that while Israel struck targets in Tehran as well as several nuclear sites overnight, Iran instead chose to go after a hospital, quote, "where people can't even get up and run away." Though there you then also had a lot of people calling those words viciously hypocritical given Israel's unrelenting assault on hospitals in Gaza. With, for example, vocal commentators, timeline is lit up with Israel defenders finally speaking up about a hospital being bombed after spending the last 20 months defending the bombing of every hospital in Gaza. Right, and that is reportedly of the 36 hospitals in Gaza, 19 are completely shut down and the other 17 are only partially operational. With also NBC noting that in recent weeks, Israel's bombings on hospitals in Gaza have risen to their highest level so far this year. And while you have Israel consistently maintaining that Hamas is using the hospitals for military purposes, purposes, organizations like the UN have said that Israel has not provided enough evidence to actually prove that. But either way, you have NBC saying the wider health system, including ambulances, field hospitals, and clinics, has been attacked more than 700 times since the start of the war, killing at least 900 people and injuring more than 1,000. With the death toll across all of Gaza climbing to 55,000 over the last 19 months, according to its health ministry. But then going back to Israel and Iran fighting each other, that's now entering its 7th day, and everyone's kind of still waiting to see if Trump's going to throw the US directly into the mix. Because this week, he's been saying stuff like, I may do it, I may not do it, nobody knows what I'm going to do. Which, my bad impression of my dad's voice aside, that's a literal quote. But according to the Wall Street Journal, Trump actually told senior aides on Tuesday that he has now approved attack plans on Iran. However, the report says that he's holding off on pulling the trigger to see if Tehran will abandon its nuclear program first, with the BBC adding there that Trump's specifically considering striking an underground uranium enrichment facility at Fordo. But there's also a pretty fierce debate not only about should the US do it, but whether the US could actually destroy the site, with some defense officials worried that a US bomb wouldn't be able to strike deep enough. And then, just to throw even more uncertainty into the mix, today you had Trump posting on Truth Social, the Wall Street Journal has no idea what my thoughts are concerning Iran. And so we're gonna have to wait to see what happens as we go into the weekend, but I'm not gonna leave you high and dry. I'm gonna be covering the updates on my main TikTok. It's Philip DeFranco. I'll link it in the description.
Did they miss their target when they struck the empty wing? It was the empty wing the target? I don't know. My suspicion is that they used like a cluster style ballistic missile, which is not as precise. And in the process, while they were trying to target like that area, I assume there is like, because there's military shit everywhere in Israel, right? You have anti-air defense systems everywhere. So you have launchers everywhere. Those are military targets. You have, you know, espionage facilities, military bases. Ironically enough, that's literally what Israel says Hamas is doing. But I suspect that given the lack of precision from this type of cluster type munition, I assume they were bombing military positions that ended up also hitting the hospital. Or they could have directly targeted the hospital too, to be fair, because so far, if you noticed, every single retaliatory attack that Iran has engaged in has actually been following through on Israel's acts of aggression first. Israel has already struck an Iranian hospital, as I covered before a couple days prior. The best example I can give you is the oil refinery that they struck, that Iran struck after Israel had hit the oil depot in Tehran. So I could totally see them actually hitting a hospital deliberately as well. I mean, it's a war crime, and they have hit civilian infrastructure already. Considering that Israel already hit their nuclear facilities a couple times at this point, and especially the last night's strikes on a nuclear facility, the one called Arak, that's a collaborative nuclear facility with China and Iran. I suspect that today will be tonight when they strike back, depending on what took place today, because there was some reports of maybe like a decapitation strike that took place against Khamenei. But I suspect that at some point they will strike back at a Israeli nuclear facility. It's all been tit for tat. It's all been tit for tat so far.
Out of their mind, or completely falsifying the situation against China. Now, I would urge the United States, don't mess around with China. Don't view China.
Iraq was a heavy water facility that wasn't even finished yet. Also, Russia is warning about another facility where they have their own scientists working. Yeah. Financial Times citing sources after meeting with Rubio, the British Foreign Secretary will convey a message to Iran that a diplomatic solution is possible. Britain's impression after Lamy and prosecutors meeting at the White House is that Washington prefers a diplomatic solution. Oh my God. I mean, hopefully. Oh yeah. A senior Iranian official says Iran moved all enriched uranium, including the 60% Natanz stockpile, to safe sites ahead of Israeli strikes. Israel hit Natanz and Isfahan's nuclear facility, Khondab and Arak, but those sites are already evacuated. All the materials they were looking to destroy have been moved to a safe place, said senior Iranian official Mohsen Rezai. What is it? This is possibly the most Israeli video I've ever seen. This video has been circulating but I don't know if it actually is. I don't think there's any confirmation on this. Like, the caption might just be a fucking lie, you know what I mean? Settlers are now locking other settlers out of shelters to keep them from getting crowded. BM posted a new video saying it's true. That I trust. BM does reliable reporting from inside of Israel, even though he's no longer inside of Israel. BM is an anti-Zionist Israeli Jew who used to live in Israel, and I don't think he lives in Israel any longer, but his reporting on this stuff is like pretty consistent. Or her reporting. I don't know. I don't know what their gender is. No, I do. I'm pretty sure he's a he. I remember him posting like a photo, never his face, but like a little bit of a photo that showed his like body. Do shit. He's actually a symbolic figurehead of sorts, and IRGC and Army have been long in power and will use Khamenei's death to excuse to fully take over. Are you assuming? Oh God, you guys are so lame, dude. What is this, fucking 2016? That's literally like, it could go both ways. 2016 era social justice warrior shit, or 2016 era anti-social justice warrior shit. Both are still annoying. And I can't tell which is which, you know? Reza is the former IRGC commander and a senior member of the Expediency Council, a body that advises the supreme leader and resolves disputes between branches of government. He added that Iran had anticipated war with Israel as early as March. Not that video is true, but the other stories are. Apparently, the people who prevented the Arab nurse from entering the shelter were her own patients who she came to treat. Despite of that, she continued treating them afterwards. Jewish residents of Krayot expelled an Arab nurse from a shelter this morning because she's Arab, and 2 days ago, a similar incident occurred with an Arab family in Jaffa because one of the women was wearing a hijab. That is fucking insane. Jewish residents of the neighborhoods expelled an Arab sister from a shelter this morning because she's Arab, and 2 days ago, a similar incident occurred with an Arab family in Jaffa because one of the women was wearing a hijab. He also posted this. Judeo-Nazi anti-refugee activist Shefi Paz posted this video and wrote, "And at the next rocket alarm, we will have to fight with them again for every square meter in the shelter. And again, there will be residents who will be left outside. Cursed be Huldai, mayor of Tel Aviv, who neglects the neighborhoods. Cursed be the infiltrators who destroy the neighborhoods. And cursed be every heart-bleeding fool who thinks is charming." Photographed in one of the shelters in occupied Shapira neighborhood. He's talking about black people and brown people, which is ironic because half of the Israeli Jews are brown. Some of them are actually black. But that doesn't stop this Israeli Jew from hating the other Israeli Jews for not being sufficiently white passing. Very cool country. Fantastic stuff going on over there, you know? Reminds me of the videos of Ukraine where black people were stopped from evacuating before white people. Oh, yeah. There was some crazy shit. I don't understand how they distinguish. Is it literally just skin color? I mean,